Hello, and welcome to the Kentucky Academic Standards and Alternate Assessment Overview. This overview is the first in a series of trainings designed to assist special education teachers responsible for instructing the revised Kentucky Academic Standards and Alternate Assessment Targets. In this training series, you will be exploring the revised Kentucky Academic Standards in relation to alternate assessment targets and resources available to teachers to help you deepen your understanding of the standards, big ideas, and key concepts. Please contact your Kentucky Special Education Cooperative Low Incidence Consultant for additional information. This webinar was developed by a task group from the Kentucky Special Education Cooperatives. Some members of the task group will be presenting today's information. We value your input and hope you will provide feedback on the information presented using the links found at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to contact your Kentucky Special Education Cooperative Low Incidence Consultant for additional information. We're going to have some fun in just a moment. You will be prompted by Edpuzzle to answer some questions. The first question in Edpuzzle will be, share the number of years you've been teaching. Our learning targets for today are the 4 learning targets listed in the slide. Take a moment and identify for yourself which of the targets you are most interested in learning about today. Students who are participating in Kentucky Alternate Assessment will receive instruction in all Kentucky academic standards. Teachers are responsible for modifying grade level content to make standards accessible for students based on best practices in instruction for students with moderate to severe disabilities. For the purpose of assessment, students will be assessed on the alternate assessment targets. The alternate assessment targets are what is being assessed. It's just a subset of the entire set of standards. Like taking a temperature is just a small measure of how we know someone is healthy. The work we're sharing today is part of the Kentucky Department of Education's larger work on supporting students on alternate assessment. As teachers of students with moderate to severe disabilities, we have specific assessment targets we are working towards to help us ensure our teaching and learning for students is on track with national norms and expectations. In his June 2020 presentation, KDE Alternate Assessment Coordinator Kevin O'Hare shared some key updates. In the next few slides, we'd like to highlight the big ideas that will help us all be on the same page. To develop the alternate assessment targets, a year-long process was put in place. Starting in September 2019, a group of MSD teachers, KDE content, special education, and assessment and accountability consultants, along with regional low incidence consultants and content experts came together to review the standards and narrow down key targets specific to alternate assessment. This work included meetings to analyze and prioritize Kentucky academic standards for each grade and content. Why is there a name change and why are we not calling them alternate assessment standards? An alternate assessment target represents limits to a selected Kentucky academic standard. An alternate assessment target may reduce parts of the standard with specific guidance to what an assessment item could represent. Not all Kentucky academic standards selected for assessments will have an alternate assessment target and may display the language, "No limitations." All parts of the Kentucky academic standard are eligible to be included as an assessment item. This would mean that the entire standard is eligible in its entirety to be used in the development of assessment items. The original intent by the United States Department of Education, USED, was to assess all Kentucky academic standards. On this slide, you will see the content area, the number of standards assessed in that content area, and the grade level in which those alternate assessment targets are assessed. A notable difference is that writing and science will have 6 standards assessed, whereas the other content areas will assess 10 content standards. Another noteworthy difference is science. Science standards will remain the same as in past years. Furthermore, keep in mind as you review the standards that not every standard will have an alternate assessment target. In a moment, you'll be prompted by Edpuzzle to answer another question. In Edpuzzle, tell us which content area you feel most comfortable with. In this slide are the updates for the 2020-2021 alternate assessment process. The AAAF will no longer be required by KDE. Districts may require the AAAF, and that alternate assessment monitoring checklists will still be available. Check with your DOS for guidance regarding the AAAF. This school year will be an operational field test. This means it will look just like always as far as number of items, and it will be part of accountability. The main difference is that if a test item is deemed spoiled, then it can be removed from accountability calculations. High school social studies assessment will be moved from grade 12 to grade 11. Again, high school social studies assessment will be moved from grade 12 to grade 11. The fall window will be moved back to February to take pressure off of teachers and students as this school year starts with a pandemic. AAA alternate assessment window 1 will be from February to March, and alternate assessment window 2 will be April to May. Some alternate assessment targets will be in both windows. The reason is that the assessment blueprint has to include a specific percentage that mirrors general education. To do this for some grades and contents, they chose a few standards that will be assessed in both windows, mainly in the middle school standards, so that additional standards did not have to be added. Let's dive into the Kentucky Academic Standards Instructional and Assessment Target Supports. A Kentucky Alternate Assessment Google site was created by the Kentucky Special Education Cooperative Networks in an attempt to provide easy access to key resources for the current alternate assessment standards. The first section of the site is the General Standards Information section, where links to resources not specific to any content area can be found. This site was meant to be fluid, and we hope to add resources as each region dives into the work. Please feel free to share resources and materials with us as you begin to plan your instruction for the standards and assessment targets. As you can see, this Google site is arranged by content area. The corresponding areas have links to instructional resources for each of the grade level standards targeted for assessment. Please remember that these resources are not meant to be an all-inclusive collection of resources, but simply a tool in helping teachers to begin instruction and to understand the standards more deeply. The Social Studies Instructional Resources Standards will be coming at a later date. When you access the Google site, you will see that Math, Reading, and Writing has access to instructional support documents. Social Studies instructional supports will be coming later this fall. Now, we're going to ask you an Edpuzzle to tell us, where are you? Tell us where you feel like you are in learning the material thus far. The Office of Assessment and Accountability, in correlation with the Kentucky Department of Education, officially released the Kentucky Academic Standards Alternate Assessment Targets for Reading and Math from 3rd grade, high school math, through high school math on May 15, 2020. If you've not reviewed the Kentucky Alternate Assessment KDE update from May 2020, please do so at this time by clicking on the link provided. To find the standards on KDE's website, go to the Kentucky Academic Standards Alternate KPREP page. You can access this page by clicking on the link in the page. Now, take a moment and complete the Padlet activity to let us know where you are at this point. It can be a question, a comment, or concern about any of the information we've shared thus far. You can also heart or like questions that are within the Padlet if you agree with those or have similar questions in that area. As a reminder, you explored this site prior to the training. We recommend that you bookmark this site, kystandards.org, so that you can easily reference the standards when you are planning lessons. It's a great idea to collaborate with your general education partners as you build capacity in the new standards. Ideally, for maximum collaboration within the least restrictive environment, it's a best practice for us to plan collaboratively and align our curriculum maps or district planning guides to work together. Here are some additional resources that we will be covering in Phase 2 and Phase 3 of our training series. Please feel free to explore these on your own. The reading and writing standards consist of multiple dimensions. The skills and content provide the what to help students access concrete and abstract thinking needed to practice the doing of reading and composing within the discipline. By specifying the three dimensions, the what, the thinking, and the doing separately, multidimensionality communicates the intent of each standard. Multidimensionality applies to instruction for MST students by answering the three questions above. What is the content in the standard? What are the expectations for comprehension? And how are students expected to analyze? These questions should be considered when developing instruction to ensure that all parts of the standards are being instructed. You will see multidimensionality mentioned as a component to the instructional support documents in just a moment. In each reading standard, you will notice the following components of the instructional assessment document. The blue arrow points to the standards. This includes the Kentucky Academic Standard typed in black and the alternate assessment target in red. You'll notice that the target standard is highlighted in yellow, noting that it is assessed in window 1. When the target is highlighted in blue, it is assessed in window 2. When the standard is highlighted in green, it is highlighted in windows 1 and 2. The red arrow denotes the multidimensionality of the grade level standard. This box helps us focus on the intent of each standard as previously discussed. The yellow arrow identifies the prerequisite skills. These concepts may be helpful in scaffolding instruction to appropriately meet each student's beginning level of instruction. The green arrow denotes the key concept or skill, I can statement, of the grade level standard. This box helps us focus on what students need to learn during instruction. These statements are written in student-friendly format. The deep blue arrow points to key vocabulary that students will need to understand to access the standard. This list is not exhaustive, and consideration has been given to the cognitive needs of the students receiving instruction. Teachers may need to scaffold the vocabulary more deeply depending on the unique learning needs of their students. The pink arrow denotes that resources can lead to deeper understanding of the standard for teachers when planning instruction. Please note that kystandards.org is listed first as the key resource to begin your exploration in teaching the standard. Please keep in mind that other listed resources may address components of the standard, but they may not include all required components of the Kentucky Academic Standards. So as you utilize these resources, be sure you are referring to the Kentucky grade level standard as you plan instruction. The deep green arrow highlights some instructional tools and resources that you can explore to help prepare for instruction. Other listed resources are not an exhaustive list, but do provide a great place to start in lesson planning. We recognize the need for building communication, visual, and behavior supports for many students. So additional resources will often be needed to support your students' instructional needs. The instructional support document is a living document. So as we move into Phase 2 and Phase 3 of the training series, which includes unit planning, additional resources will be added to this document. Please feel free to share any great resources you may find during your instructional planning with your low incidence cooperative consultant. Writing is formatted the same as reading. Edpuzzle will prompt you in just a moment to pause the recording to explore the writing instructional support documents and answer the questions, do you already instruct this standard, and where would you start? You'll now be prompted by Edpuzzle to answer, tell us your first impression of how this document will help you plan your instruction. The Math Standards document is laid out slightly different from reading and writing. The blue arrow highlights the standards for mathematical practice. The standards for mathematical practice describe varieties of expertise that mathematics educators at all levels should seek to develop in their students. These practices rest on important processes and proficiencies with long-standing importance in mathematics education. The first of these are the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics process standards of problem solving, reasoning and proof, communication, representation, and connections. The second are the strands of mathematical proficiency specified in the National Research Council's 2001 report, Adding It Up: Adaptive Reasoning, Strategic Competence, Conceptual Understanding, the Comprehension of Mathematical Concepts, Operations, and Relations, Procedural Fluency, Skill in Carrying Out Procedures Flexibly, Accurately, Efficiently, and Appropriately, and Productive Disposition, a habitual inclination to see mathematics as sensible, useful, and worthwhile, coupled with a belief in diligence in one's own efficacy. These are not standards. These are strategic tools and concepts that can be used to assist when planning instruction of mathematical concepts for all students. The red arrow shows the math standard in black and the alternate assessment in red. You'll notice that the standard is highlighted in green, noting that it is assessed in Windows 1 and 2. When the standard is highlighted in yellow, it is assessed in Window 1. When the standard is highlighted in blue, it is assessed in Window 2. The blue arrow denotes the clarification of the grade level standard. This box helps us focus on the intent of each standard, including potential real-world application. The yellow arrow denotes the connections to the mathematical practices. The Standards of Mathematical Practice describes ways in which developing student practitioners of mathematics should increasingly engage with the subject matter as they grow in mathematical maturity and expertise throughout the elementary, middle, and high school years. It is important for all educators and practitioners to understand the mathematical practices and how they relate to instruction. In this box, we have tried to put the mathematical practices in student-friendly language to help you understand the concepts needed to instruct the mathematical components of the standards. The purple arrow denotes the foundational understandings of the target, which are the prerequisite skills. These concepts may be helpful in scaffolding instruction to appropriately meet each student's beginning level of instruction. The final section of the Math Instructional Support document is divided into instructional considerations. The gray arrow points to possible areas of difficulty or misconceptions for students in regards to the components of the standard, and should be considered when planning instruction. The other section lists possible tools and visual aids that can be used when planning instruction. Again, this is not an all-inclusive list, but a place as a starting point for planning your instruction. You'll now be prompted by Edpuzzle to answer the following questions. What other questions or concerns do you have about the Kentucky Academic Standards and Alternate Assessment Targets? What additional comments, concerns, or questions do you have about the Google site and instructional supports that have been shared with you today? What additional questions or concerns might you have about accessing kystandards.org? We know many of you may be wondering what is coming up next in the process. So we have developed this timeline which highlights when additional content standards will be released, as well as what training and materials will be rolled out to support instruction of the standards. On May 15th, KDE released the alternate assessment targets for reading and math. In June 2020, Phase 1, the overview of the alternate assessment targets for reading and math, have been released. On June 18th, KDE released the alternate assessment targets for writing and social studies. In August of 2020, we will begin Phase 2 of the deeper understanding of the alternate assessment targets. And that will begin with the release of a progression document for reading, writing, and mathematics. In September of 2020, the release of the Social Studies Instructional Support document will be added as a link within the Google site. And in fall of 2020, we hope to continue Phase 2 and roll out Phase 3 of instructional units training. Your regional low incidence consultants are listed in the PowerPoint slide for each of the cooperatives. Email addresses can be displayed by clicking on each consultant's name. For additional assistance, please contact your regional special education cooperative consultant. Thank you for participating in Phase 1, the overview of the Kentucky Academic Standards and Alternate Assessment Targets. We look forward to our upcoming trainings as we dive further into the standards. Please return to your training plan and click on the links in Step 4 to complete the post-test and feedback form. Once you complete the post-test and pass it, an email will be sent with your certificate for this module. Again, thank you for joining us today.